In biology, scale creates coherence. Single cells naturally seek each other out, align their boundaries, and fuse together to form living tissue. They trade total independence for the ability to construct a unified, functioning body. Complexity science observes this and proposes a concept called multiscale isomorphism. This is a formal model arguing that the structural rules governing biological cells repeat themselves across human social layers. The theory suggests that humans should be capable of distributed cognition. In a perfectly aligned system, the mind doesn't sit inside any single person. The system itself becomes the brain. A corporate team, a political party, or a community should function as a superorganism, collectively smarter than any individual member operating alone. But anyone who has ever attended a committee meeting knows this rarely happens. We consistently fail to scale. When you add more highly intelligent people to a human group, you rarely get a cohesive superorganism. Instead, the local incentives misalign, and the group fractures into a noisy crowd or a gridlocked conflict network. We tend to blame this on human psychology or bad leadership. But the friction of groups might be better understood as a problem of information architecture, a failure of the structural laws required to hold a collective body together. This diagram represents an individual as a bounded volume of concentrated information and truth. When you join with others in a shared purpose, you form a social cell. To survive, this collective requires a semi-permeable membrane to protect its concentrated identity from the outside world. Immediately, the cell runs into an informational hurdle, signal fidelity. For physical matter, maintaining fidelity is easy because there is only one objective reality. Human groups are burdened by competing subjective realities that constantly threaten to tear the cell apart from the inside. A rock dropped from a cliff calculates the path of least resistance perfectly and falls toward the center of mass. Humans do not. We make decisions based on emotion, historical grievance, and individual ego, creating internal friction that defies simple mathematical alignment. Because of this friction, holding a group's shared meaning together is an active thermodynamic process. It requires constant energy expenditure just to keep the social cell from falling apart. When a small group expands into a formal institution or workplace, informal coordination collapses. You can no longer rely on everyone knowing each other. The group must create strict role differentiation and abstract rules to hold the structure together. At this scale, the institution requires a social immune system. It needs mechanisms to enforce norms, to correct errors, and filter out corrupted signals before they infect the entire network. This animated model shows the primary threat to that immune system, osmotic diffusion. An institution exists inside an ambient environment that is largely devoid of specific, concentrated truth. By simple laws of physics, this empty space passively extracts meaning from the dense social cell. Inside, status dynamics override the flow of accurate information, actively degrading the cell's membrane and accelerating the passive leak. Through this diffusion, the institution loses its structural depth. It continues to occupy a building, hold meetings, and pay salaries, but it is hollow. It operates entirely on ambient noise rather than internal truth. Scale this dynamic up to the macro level, political parties, mass ideologies, and entire civilizations, and the mechanics become catastrophic. A civilization operates within a political desert. This is a hostile, low-saturation environment that extracts meaning from social cells entirely through thermodynamic gradient. The environment requires no hostile intent to dry out a cell. Contact alone does the work. Survival in this desert demands forced translation. Deep, complex beliefs are permanently stripped of their compression and specificity, reduced to cheap slogans and partisan noise that the ambient environment can easily absorb. This formula illustrates how civilizations finally break. In fluid mechanics, the Reynolds number predicts when a smooth flow will turn chaotic. We can adapt this into a civilizational Reynolds number. It is the ratio of a society's technological surplus, its velocity, divided by its information viscosity, its ethical capacity to route that surplus. As a society generates massive wealth and technological capability, the internal fluid velocity of the culture drastically increases. The system is moving faster, carrying far more weight. When that society's ethical viscosity is too weak to handle the rising velocity, the math snaps. You see a violent transition from smooth progress into destructive, chaotic turbulence. The ruins of the Roman Forum are a physical record of mathematical collapse. Their unregulated informational surplus simply outweighed their geometric capacity to route it. Social cohesion is not the default state of humanity. It is not an inevitable moral arc bending toward progress. Cohesion is an expensive, emergent property. It only activates under strict, unforgiving conditions, where survival absolutely requires a group to stop acting as independent agents and function as a single body. The ambient environment does not need a grand conspiracy or active malice to destroy a functional group. Passive thermodynamic extraction will handle the destruction automatically. There is exactly one survival mechanism against this physics: active pumping. A group must engage in the conscious, relentless practice of generating internal truth. It must demand high-resolution information, reject comforting lies, and actively metabolize accurate feedback to maintain its internal pressure. In the political desert, you cannot passively exist. If your group is not actively fighting the thermodynamic diffusion of truth every single day, you are not surviving.